Hello, everyone, and thank you for those joining in person from Porto, Spain, as well as our virtual audience from across the Caribbean and the entire hemisphere. My name is Diego Area, Deputy Director of the Adrian Ash Latin America Center of the Atlantic Council, and I'm happy to be here with you today. I'm thrilled to be in Trinidad to discuss how Caribbean voices can shape the agenda of the next Summit of the Americas in the Dominican Republic. As part of this roadshow, we are traveling to various past summit host countries to promote the importance of the summit and hear from organizers lessons learned to inform the agenda of the next summit. Our focus in Trinidad is on advancing climate resilience, energy security and infrastructure, access to finance, and improving citizen security, all key priorities for the Caribbean. The objective of this stop of the roadshow will be to generate actionable insights, foster collaboration across sectors, and ensure that Caribbean voices remain central to the summit process. I want to acknowledge our partners without whom this event wouldn't have been possible: the American Chambers of Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator, Republic Bank Limited, and the U.S. Department of State. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce the U.S. Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, Ambassador Candace Bond, who will provide opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right, it's an honor to be here today as we gather to discuss the critical issues of climate and energy that impact Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean region. The United States government has been deeply committed to leading and supporting efforts to address these challenges, and we must work together if we are to realize a sustainable and resilient future. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Summit of the Americas, a milestone that underscores the enduring importance of collaboration and dialogue throughout the region. As we celebrate this significant occasion, we are reminded of the progress we have made and the work that still lies ahead of us, and our continued collaboration is pivotal to our journey for a more inclusive and effective summit process. Today, we are privileged to convene a diverse group of stakeholders from the public sector, the business community, I see a lot of my friends here, multilateral organizations, and civil society. Your presence and participation are invaluable as we seek to gather inputs and ideas for the next year's summit agenda and process. The discussions that we have here will help shape the future of our region and ensure that Caribbean voices are prominently featured in the summit process. Our agenda today is broad and ambitious, reflecting the multifaceted nature of the challenges that we face. We will delve into themes such as energy security, climate resilience, addressing ways to improve citizen security, and affordable access to finance. Each of these areas is critical to the well-being and prosperity of our communities, and it is through our collective efforts that we can make meaningful progress together. Energy security is a cornerstone of sustainable development, and we must work together to ensure that our energy systems are resilient, reliable, and capable of supporting economic growth. Climate resilience is equally important, as the Caribbean is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. We can feel it every day here. By investing in adaptive strategies and innovative solutions, we can protect our environment and our people. Addressing citizen security is absolutely essential for creating safe and thriving communities, and we must continue to collaborate on effective strategies to reduce crime and promote justice. Additionally, affordable access to finance is absolutely crucial for empowering individuals and businesses to achieve their full potential. By improving financial inclusion, we can drive economic development and reduce inequality for all. In closing, I want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you for your dedication and commitment to all of these issues, each important. The insights and ideas generated here today will be instrumental in shaping the future of our region. Together, we can build a more secure, resilient, and prosperous Caribbean. Thank you so much for your time and attention, and I really look forward to our discussions today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Bond, for those excellent remarks, for being such a good friend of the Atlantic Council and the Caribbean Initiative and everything we try to do in Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean. With that, I would love to introduce a virtual keynote message from Trinidad and Tobago's Minister of Energy and Energy Industries as we kick off the first of two panels on today's conversation. So everybody, please turn your attention to the screens.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Trinidad and Tobago. My humblest apologies for not being able to be there with you today in person. I really would have welcomed the opportunity to be physically present. Nevertheless, I could not pass up the privilege and the opportunity to share my thoughts and my views on such an important forum as this one here this afternoon. Allow me at the outset to thank the Atlantic Council for continuing to take so much of an interest in our region and in particular here in Trinidad and Tobago. But more importantly, to our great friends and allies, United States government, both through its existing embassy here in Trinidad and Tobago, and allow me to single-handedly thank Ambassador Candace Bond for the tremendous work that she has done to bridge and to draw us closer between Trinidad and Tobago and the United States, but also our very important partners and persons that we have grown so accustomed to working closely with at the U.S. State Department. To all others present, good afternoon. And indeed, thank you for your time here this afternoon. I'm here once again talking about energy and the collaboration between our core sectors and what is taking place in our climate. And it struck me, we have never had a closer relationship, working relationship, such as we've had in the past few years, really starting with the Summit of the Americas in July of 2022 in Los Angeles, United States, when under President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris, we drew the CARICOM heads of state even closer, and the working relationship that we've come to treasure, appreciate, and to build on between the United States government and all of us here in the CARICOM region really started working in earnest in a way that we haven't seen for many decades. But it continued to be built on a very strong foundation of the relationship between the United States and this region. One of the areas coming out of that Summit of the Americas that all were directed to work on, from the White House to all of the various governments throughout the CARICOM region, was energy security. Energy security has become one of the topics, the hot topics globally, but very important for us here in our small island states and even our mainland CARICOM states. It is something that we've been working very closely with the United States government over the past few years. And it's an opportune moment for me to thank you, the members of the United States government, from the State Department, from the embassy here in Trinidad and Tobago, from all of the private sector elements that you brought together, including those who were given instructions directly from the White House to work with us here in the region to see what we could do to ensure energy security in a climate crisis that we're seeing increasingly by seasons affecting our daily lives. So allow me at the outset to say that without that close bilateral and multilateral relationship that we've seen being developed over the past few years in the energy sphere, not much would be achieved. However, I'm happy to report that conversely, what we have achieved in the past few years really has been unprecedented. For the first time, we sat as a region, we began planning and identifying projects throughout the region, working along with the various arms of the United States government to see what could be done to provide that energy security for our region in a sustainable manner and in a manner using renewable resources at times. So we have solar projects that are being looked at, we have geothermal projects that are being looked at. We're also pursuing the use of wind turbine energy. Some of our smaller Caribbean islands, Barbados, Dominica, St. Lucia. Then right here, the 3 CARICOM states of Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago are pursuing, along with help from our United States allies, pursuing oil and gas production in manners that would not have happened had we not worked together. We will continue to put our heads together, and we look forward to the continuation of the building of these relationships, because energy security is something that touches every single life. Without energy security, there's no proper power generation. Many of our islands, many of our CARICOM countries, we have reached the points where our grids need to be looked at. And now we're looking at how do we decarbonize the production of electricity. We're learning from the experiences of those wealthier countries, and in particular the United States, learning from the technologies that they've employed, being able hopefully to tap into the economies of scale of the type of projects they have undergone, getting their assistance with feasibility studies, because one of the great problems we've had throughout the region is the bankability of some of these renewable projects. I am happy as the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries, Minister in the Office of the Prime Minister for Trinidad and Tobago, to say that we are at the forefront of the largest solar project in the CARICOM region, the English-speaking CARICOM region, that is currently being constructed, along with BP and Shell. We're also pursuing discussions with the United States government as to how we may be able to utilize other decarbonization projects. We're looking at how do we clean up our energy sector. We're looking at green hydrogen. We're looking at the utilization of our existing infrastructure. How could it be brought to bear in providing energy, not only for the region, but also globally? And it is with your assistance, the assistance of US Gov, that we've been able to make the strides that we have in the last few years. I look forward as the Minister of Energy in continuing to work not only on behalf of my country, but on behalf of the CARICOM region to ensure that we find ways to carry some of these projects that are absolutely critical for our CARICOM neighbors, to carry some of these projects from feasibility to implementation stage, so that the citizens of CARICOM in some of our island states would be able to have secure power generation in a manner that is state-of-the-art and utilizing the renewable resources that we have been blessed with in this area of the world. For example, our sunshine for solar, the wind for wind turbine generation. I'd like to say that it is only with proper collaboration, and collaboration not only amongst governments and amongst citizens, but also with private sector. So I'm pleased today that we also have AmCham here and Republic Bank here, because you are the ones who are going to help us to get that private sector interest to cross the bankability formulas, the bankability tests that need to be conducted, and to make these things a reality. One thing that we should have learned over the last couple of years is that this can only be done if we all work together and pulling in the same direction. Again, I apologize for not being able to be there with you today to hear the robust conversation, but also I am assured and I'm willing to bet one of the resounding things that will come out of this afternoon's conference is that we will all continue to work together, and that we will continue to work together with one of our closest and strongest allies, the government of the United States, to make sure that the CARICOM region, our private sectors, our governments, and importantly our citizens are all able to benefit in a manner and in manners that provide not only energy security, but a better way of life. So in conclusion, it would be remiss of me not to once again to put on the table and put frontally our heartfelt thanks for the work that has taken place so far in this closer collaboration that would not have happened if we did not have the ears of those in Washington and the commitment of those in Washington, and to say that we look forward to continuing to build from strength to strength this most important relationship for us, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but the rest of the CARICOM region. Because together and united we stand, it can only be a stronger partnership, and one that provides solutions for the many great difficulties that we will continue to face with global climate change and the provision of energy security for our respective peoples. I thank you for your attention.
Well, hello again, everyone. You all know me already. I am thrilled to be moderating this fireside chat conversation. And as I said before, I'm excited about doing it from Trinidad and Tobago, a country that holds a special place as the first and only Caribbean nation to have hosted the Summit of the Americas, for now, Ambassador.
That's correct.
We know. And I want to share with you some background about what brought us here. Just a few weeks ago, we started this roadshow in Santiago de Chile, which hosted the second summit in 1998. In Santiago, we engaged with multiple stakeholders and discussed the intersection between democracy, security, technology, and human rights. And later this week, on Thursday, we'll be traveling to Panama to continue this roadshow, focusing on stakeholders forum, youth participation, civil society, the CEO Summit, and the City Summit as well. This journey will continue next year, which we will be visiting other key past countries, hosts, further shaping the agenda of the Dominican Republic as the upcoming summit host. But coming back to Trinidad, right before this event, as many of you know, we had the privilege of convening a very insightful private strategy session with key leaders from government, the private sector, and civil society. We discussed ideas about how to leverage the next summit in the Dominican Republic to advance climate resilience, energy security and infrastructure, access to finance, and improve citizen security, all key priorities for Caribbean countries. The objective of this discussion and the upcoming discussion will be to reflect on the key takeaways from that discussion, generating actionable insights, fostering collaboration across sectors, and ensuring that Caribbean voices remain critical to the summit process. All this event in Chile, Trinidad, and Panama, we have seen strong representation not only from the US government, but also from the Dominican government. And this highlights the importance of this discussion in shaping the agenda of the upcoming summit. So now it is my honor to begin this conversation with a distinguished group of high-level panelists. I will start with Ambassador Francisco Mora, U.S. Ambassador to the Organization of American States and U.S. National Summit Coordinator, former Professor of Politics and International Relations at Florida International University. He served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for the Western Hemisphere as well, and he has authored 5 books and over 30 articles on hemispheric security. With us is also today Ambassador Wellington Bencosme, Dominican Republic's ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago, an economist and diplomat with over 20 years of experience, Deputy Chief of Mission at the Dominican Embassy in Washington, D.C., Director of U.S. and Canada Relations and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc., etc., etc. And joining us shortly,
It's right there.
there he is, Ambassador Philip Spencer, who currently serves as Director of the Ministry of National Security of the Republic of Trinidad and served as Ambassador to the United States for more than 8 years. Ambassador Mora, I will ask you an easy one. Why is the Summit of the Americas important? Why we should care?
Thank you, Diego, and good afternoon, everyone. Ambassadors, good to see you again.
Good to see you. Good to see you again. Bye.
Just want to take a moment to thank you, Diego, and the Atlantic Council for organizing this very comprehensive meeting and discussion in the lead to the 30th anniversary that will be held next month in Dominican Republic, and of course leading also to the Summit of the Americas, the 10th Summit in a year from now, or a year from next month. And also want to thank you for all coming and joining the session. I was in the session prior and was listening to some of the discussion in the breakout groups, and I really appreciated the frank, honest, productive, constructive discussion that you all had on issues related to climate, security, energy resilience, and so forth. So I think that I think we can all agree that if we look at the summit process, it's been 30 years of achievements, and it gives us, I think, an opportunity to reflect, to take stock of the 30 years, what we've accomplished, the goals, but also future opportunities in support of the 10th Summit of the Americans. There have been challenges throughout the 30 years, of course, and every moment I think we've tried to address those. In my view, the value of the summit or the summit process is that they do just this, right? They bring together all the key stakeholders, right? Not just government leaders, but civil society, the private sector, youth representatives from across the region to work together to address the challenges and look into the opportunities that are facing the hemisphere. These stakeholders, and I've just mentioned a few, from each country in the region, what do they do? How do they contribute to the summit process? Well, they are an input to the discussion. They help inform our leaders to make the right decisions. They inform citizens in addition to governments. They hold us accountable for what we're doing or not doing, if you will. They engage, of course, in advocacy. They are the experts. They have the knowledge. They have the experience. We really could not have a summit where all the leaders are present without that particular input. And so we, the United States, have done everything, and certainly at the Los Angeles Summit, to make the participation of this vast and diverse group a critical part of the summit process. At the last summit, at the 9th Summit in Los Angeles, the United States held a series of dialogues with all these groups. We had a civil society forum where we had civil society organizations participate. We had small businesses participate in the CEO forum, really for the first time. And we hosted the first, not at the summit, but months later, the first city summit, where all the local leaders, the municipal mayors, along with civil society, along with private sectors, met to discuss the issues that affect citizens and communities at the local levels. And we feel that when all of these groups are participating and incorporating, involved directly as equal partners in the discussion, what we get out at the end, the outcomes, the priorities identified by their leaders, have a sense of consensus, not just among leaders, but throughout society. I often say that the nature of the challenges we face today requires nations to work across. No single nation can tackle these challenges by themselves. I think we have to go a step further. Not just all nations working together, but communities and the private sector. It's a whole of global community working together to inform and to hold us accountable. In the engagements that we've had, for example, in Los Angeles, Stakeholders called on the leaders and governments to catalyze and institutionalize green finance, to coordinate ways to lower emissions, for example. Talked about inclusive economic recovery, ensure security communities, et cetera, and of course uphold democratic governance and institutions. So that's, I think, the most important part, I think, Diego, and we're doing all of this to respond to the calls for action that our citizens are asking us, right? In light of the challenges that we face. Now, each summit is not a vacuum, right? After each summit, work needs to get done in implementing everything that was agreed upon, right? This is not just a question of the presidents and the prime ministers meeting, having a great meeting, agreeing on a few issues, and then putting it on the bookshelf. There's got to be work done in between summits, and that is what we've been doing in the run-up to the Dominican Republic, because our citizens require us to just not talk about lofty promises, but to execute and implement on those promises.
Thank you, Ambassador Mora. I was tempted to react and to comment on what you're saying, but we have only 15 minutes for this discussion, and I want to make the most of it. So, Ambassador Phyllis Spencer, same question. Why is the summit important, and how can we make it more inclusive?
All right, well, first, thanks very much for the opportunity to join this panel. Short notice, but happy to respond. There are three big issues right now of the highest importance for the citizens of this hemisphere that really emphasize the importance of the summit's process: inclusion, integration, innovation. As the summit coordinator for Trinidad and Tobago, as we prepared for the 9th summit, for example, we went through a process where we engaged and had preparatory meetings, representatives of civil society, of course, public sector, all the government ministries, but private sector, civil society, academia, the labor sector, youth, because much of what is done at these summits will address issues that our youth and other vulnerable populations need to address going forward. And so the summits provides a platform for a very inclusive approach. The agenda of hemispheric integration, critical for issues such as trade and economics and all of the other issues that speak to the opportunities for countries in the hemisphere to advance prosperity and productivity, and even issues of hemispheric peace. Again, the Summits of the Americas provides a platform like that. In the Caribbean, we speak to a concept of multidimensional security, and we understand that the purpose of security is not just security. Security is so that we can enable our citizens to live lives that are peaceable, productive, and prosperous. And so the efforts made, for example, at the 9th summit, which did deliver on a number of key issues, such as to address issues of resilience and health security, which is a key component of a multidimensional approach to security, again, highlights the importance of the Summit of the Americas to address key concerns. And then, when you look at innovation with the current challenges that we face now, like climate change, top of the list, energy transition, another key one, all of which were addressed in very specific outcome commitments from the 9th summit. The issue of innovation and the new opportunities provided by the summit's process, such as for us in the Caribbean, for example, PAC 2030. I mean, there you had it right away, a very clear, definitive benefit of the summit's process to address some of the issues related to the imperative of innovation. So I could keep going on. Let me just address one other key aspect of the importance of the summit's process, not just for the hemisphere, but the extent to which we are able to integrate the things we pursue in the summit's process to the broader global agenda, the SDGs. We know them all. But at the summit in Los Angeles, for example, we saw specific attention paid to issues of democratic governance.
Yeah.
Yes? We saw attention paid to issues of migration and all the other issues that more and more we realize are addressed decent work. Let me conclude by sharing this observation. Following the Summit of the Americas in June of 2022, Trinidad and Tobago assumed the chairmanship of the Permanent Council of the OAS in the first quarter of 2023. And we were very pleased that at the end of our tenure as the chair, we were able to advance a unanimously supported declaration on advancing equity in the hemisphere, in the Americas, and social justice. These are things that are of key importance for our citizens. These are the issues that will build public trust, will improve public confidence, give them the sense that the public interest, things that matter to them, are being addressed. And at the end of the day, we look forward to seeing how the summit's process will improve the delivery on public service. So I'll stop there for now. I'm sure if we have a chance for a bit of engagement, we could continue.
For sure, Ambassador. Thank you very much. I think we all agree that tackling security hemispheric issues is an imperative, and the Summit of the Americas is the perfect platform to advance shared solutions to that. Now I want to go to the Dominican Republic, Ambassador Bencosme. As summit host, how can the DR work with Caribbean countries to ensure inclusion of their voices in the process itself? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Diego. And let me start by thanking, obviously, the Atlantic Council. And obviously, it's very honored to be here in this panel with Ambassador Mora and Ambassador Philip Spencer. Definitely for the Dominican Republic, it is a privilege to be hosting the 10th Summit of the Americas. And, we have pledged to build definitely on the success of the previous summit. Particularly, and we are very thankful to the Organization of American States, the Secretariat of the Summit, for the support that we're getting. All the different institutions, the regional and multilateral institutions that are supporting the process, the summit process that we currently chair. We're definitely thankful to the United States, obviously, for the support that we're getting as we inherit the chair of the process, as it was mentioned by Ambassador Philip Spencer, and the importance of the process. So when it comes to the participation of the other Caribbean countries, I mean, we are definitely, Ambassador Spencer, also very pleased to be here today, which is actually this was the venue for the fifth summit of the Americas back in 2009. So definitely, we are pleased to be the second Caribbean nation to be hosting a summit. So we definitely, are building on the success that Trinidad and Tobago and the United States had on the summit. So I think, as it was mentioned before, a lot of we are a country committed to multilateralism, and as a result, obviously, we are very much vested in the process of the Summits of the Americas. As it was mentioned, I think it is the venue, it is the actually space, the ideal space to actually bring about the needs or identifying the needs of the population in terms of, obviously, strengthening democracy, in terms of economic development, human rights, and peace, and the promotion of peace. So I think, we, as in the country, we are expecting to channel those areas of those subjects that are going to be, identify within the summit process. I think events like these are key to actually talk about the different areas of issues of importance. And we can see from the history of the summit that a lot of these subjects we still have to work on a lot of them, obviously. It was mentioned by the Ambassador Philip Spencer, the issue of climate. We, as small island development state, that's going to be a big issue for us. The issue, as we are confronted with more and more drastic and climate events that impacts our economy, particularly, service economic like the ones that we have in the region. So we very likely going to see, obviously, a lot of these issues that are channeled through the whole summit process. This consultation with the civil society are key to actually, so obviously this is a call for further engagement of civil society, for further engagement of the private sector within the process. And I mean, it's the structure is there within the summit process to actually channel the contributions of the private sector and civil society. It was mentioned the youth, participation of youth in the process, which is key. And I think, we as Dominican Republic, I think we are promoting heavily the participation of youth. As we want to listen to what the future generation have to say about their concerns.
Of course.
And so that we can channel. So in terms of the participation of the agreement, we hope to be the voice too of, sister Caribbean nations who are, because that's, as a Caribbean nation, we, in fact, are struggling with a number of issues, mostly related to the impact of climate change in our economies, mostly related to crime, obviously. I mean, we are positioned in a very strategic location for the worse and the better, obviously, but this is the truth. And so we hope to be the voice of the region, the similar way that Trinidad was during the first summit. We're thinking in terms of energy security. We're thinking in issues like food security. Obviously, we're very likely going to see the whole issue of better access to finance to be among the issues that will probably come up. But then again, it's part of a process that we have to find, obviously, political consensus at. But this is the key. This is the right moment to receive the contributions from the private sector, from the civil society. So the encouragement for the participation of the Caribbean within the process is to, get involved. Obviously, I'm not reaching out mostly to civil society and the private sector. Get involved through the different channels so that their position can be bring up to the heads of states and can be discussed during and bring about during the summit in the Dominican Republic. We're very excited about the 30-year anniversary, which is the title of this event. He has been conveyed by the President Luis Abinader and Minister of Foreign Affairs Roberto Alvarez the intention of hosting a big event in the Dominican Republic precisely to celebrate the 30-year anniversary of the first summit back in '94 in Miami. With this, it had been announced that we're expecting the ex-President Bill Clinton, under whose tenure the first summit was celebrated, and a number of leaders from the hemisphere who somehow participated in the previous summit. So we're excited about having an opportunity to reflect on the success of the previous summits during this celebration. And as Ambassador Mora mentioned, we are obviously ready and very committed to the summit in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, at the end of the year 2025.
Thank you, Ambassador. For sure, multi-stakeholder engagement is key for inclusion of new actors. I was told by my team that we're running out of time, and this is called a fireside chat. So let's address this second question in a dynamic way, so we build space for the second conversation. Ambassador Mora, could you share with the audience what are the key takeaways of past summit of the Americas that we can learn from?
So again, it's worth repeating. There is really no other hemispheric space or platform where we have a policy dialogue that includes not just leaders, but with significant input and partnership with stakeholders, these multi-sector stakeholders that produce specific outcomes. What are those outcomes? What have been the results of some of these meetings? Well, one, the Inter-American Democratic Charter is a product of a Summit of the Americas initiative. The Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, that is a product of the summit process. The Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression, and the creation of the Inter-American Committee Against Terrorism, and I can go on. But these are some of the key outcomes of the summit, and there's no reason why we can't continue making those kinds of contributions to the inter-American system and to hemispheric affairs. After COVID-19, right, in Los Angeles, the governments agreed to an action plan on health resilience to address or strengthen the region's health infrastructure and promote resilience. this space offers the United States an opportunity to present certain initiatives. Ambassador mentioned PAC 2030. That's a summit initiative. The Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. That's an initiative that we offered at the Summit of the Americas. Anyways, I can go on renewable energy and a number of other initiatives that the United States and other governments have presented. And the key is to keep this momentum, right? And to show and to demonstrate to the citizens of the Americas that this is a space and a platform for all to participate and to hold our governments accountable and to offer initiatives on a whole range of issues, from energy and climate and security and democracy, et cetera, right? So let's not squander this opportunity. Let's build on all the accomplishments and support the Dominican Republic with everything we have so that we can build on this issue of security, which seems to be a theme that they will be touching upon.
And it has served to tackle some of the past challenges, and hopefully in the future there are challenges that we don't even know that we'll face as a hemisphere. That is a perfect space for the region to tackle those. Ambassador Philip Spencer, any reactions or any comments on key takeaways of past summits?
Yeah, well, thanks very much to Ambassador Mora for jogging my memory about the CBSI. The CBSI, for those who may not have been aware, was first announced here in Port of Spain by President Obama. And I see present here with us the leader of our hosting of that summit effort, Ambassador Rodriguez. Thanks very much. But again, you know, every summit seems to respond to the moment. And so what happened in Port of Spain in 2009 was a recognition that, particularly after 9/11 and attempts across the globe to strengthen international security cooperation efforts through the ISPS and the establishment of SICTE and so on, it was now necessary to focus particularly on our region in the Caribbean to strengthen our cooperation with key partners like the United States and other partners in the hemisphere on security. In Los Angeles, the outcome, the commitment made by heads to strengthen health resilience and security was a direct response to the COVID crisis.
Correct.
Right now, I think countries across the hemisphere, particularly in the Caribbean, we are particularly concerned with, of course, climate change, so we expect to continue to build on PAC 2030. But there's also another key underlying issue that our heads from the Caribbean have been traveling all over the globe advocating for. It is time to address clear challenges in the international financial system that enable small countries like Trinidad and Tobago, considered to be high income, but as my colleague from Antigua and Barbuda said during COVID, Antigua and Barbuda, also categorized as high income, during COVID was a no-income economy. But because of that, we are shut out and closed out of access to several important lines of development financing, channels of development financing. So I really look forward to, in Dominican Republic, seeing again the summit seize the moment to address, particularly for member states in this hemisphere, how can we strengthen and make more equitable and make more accessible for small developing countries access to international financing, development financing. How do we as a hemisphere increase our intra-regional trade? The data is clear that for a region like ours, we trade more outside of the region than among ourselves. How do we address issues like that? So yes, I would fully endorse the views expressed by Ambassador Mora. And just to go back to the youth, in the last summit, the Young America's Business Trust, again, addresses the emerging requirement for us to create innovative platforms for entrepreneurship for our youth. And I'm sure that must be on the agenda for the next summit.
Definitely. Thank you very much, Ambassador Philip Spencer. Ambassador Ben Cosme, closing remarks on opportunities for the Caribbean with the summit in the DR.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think the message and our pledge has been on delivering an inclusive and effective summit the Dominican Republic. Again, I think the word inclusiveness is key, as we are in this summit of the American process, that we're trying to get as many inputs as we can gather, definitely from the different organizations. Up to date, we have consulted with about 200 civil society representatives from different regions, and within the Caribbean, virtually every country in the Caribbean represented. So we hope to get those inputs, particularly, you mentioned, Ambassador Philip Spencer, the youth. I mean, it's key to get the inputs from the youth community and see what are the concerns. So we hope to, as we lead to our summit in the Dominican Republic, that we can, first of all, gather all these inputs from private sector and civil society, and hopefully come to a consensus, a political consensus that will be, again, effective, that we can identify solutions to the problem brought to the table.
Thank you very much, ambassadors, for this very insightful conversation. I would like to now turn it over to my colleague, Wazim Maula, fellow and lead of the Caribbean Initiative, to talk about climate and energy solutions. Applause for the panel, please.
Ambassador, it's an honor. I was really happy to hear from you.
We okay? Maybe right in the middle. Excellent, thank you. Thank you, Diego, for making that fireside chat very rapid and fireside-like. We have a tendency at the Atlantic Council to pack as much content into an hour and a half as possible, and so very much appreciate those of you that are sticking with us. As Diego mentioned, we had a private session earlier on in the day, and now we've moved on to a public session, and we are now keeping you from being able to go home, but I promise this is going to be a worthwhile conversation. Diego talked a lot about, with his panel at the macro level, talking about the importance of the Summit of the Americas, talked about institutions, multilateral mechanisms. Some of those comments, both in the private session and in the public session, climate change and energy security, the energy transition was clearly prevalent, which means that our final panel will focus on those two issues, and not just on those issues in a silo, but thinking about how can we bring together the public sector, which has historically worked on these issues and represented governments and interests across the Summit of the Americas, but also bring in the private sector as well. How do we ensure that the public and private sector are able to work together adequately to address these issues, not just today, but thinking about 10, 20 years into the future. So for that conversation, we have a fantastic panel that has been lined up. First, to my left, we have Daniel Best, who is a board member at the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator, which is one of our partners for today's event. He's also a senior advisor on infrastructure and development to Prime Minister Motley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, and has previously worked as director of projects at the Caribbean Development Bank. So he'll be able to give us a regional outlook on some of these issues. To his left, we have Tisha Miraj, who is representing Republic Bank Limited as a senior manager and group sustainability officer. Also, Republic Bank being a partner of this event, and Tisha's participated in a number of things that we've done in the past. So Tisha, great to have you here. To her left, we have Dale Ramlakan, who is the head of Caribbean Development at HDF Energy, but also a non-resident senior fellow with the Caribbean Initiative at the Atlantic Council, and has been integral in helping to pull a lot of this together. So Dale, thanks for joining as well. And then last but not least, we have our final partner for the event, the American Chamber of Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago President, Stuart Franco, who is also the CEO of TSL Group. So Stuart, thank you very much for joining us and also being the private sector rep on this conversation as well. So as we mentioned, we're going to take a look at some of the climate and energy issues across the Caribbean, and more importantly, solutions to them, and how the Summit of the America process and Summit of America itself can be a facilitator for both presenting new ideas, but also implementation of those solutions. So first, I'll start with you, Daniel. Can you have a regional profile in many ways and done a lot of work on the region. Can you give us sort of your regional vision on, one, what are some of the challenges attributed to the effects of climate change and energy insecurity, but then sort of what do you see as the needed solutions going forward?
Sure, thanks Wazim, and thanks for having us here, CCSA, and thank everyone for joining us both in person and online. So, you know, in responding to that, I could perhaps start by quoting some statistics that I think we may be familiar with, right? CARICOM would have set a regional energy target of 27% RE penetration by 2022, 47% by 2027, I think it was, yeah? In 2022, we were actually at somewhere around 12-13%. So we're somewhere off that, even though CARICOM has been doing some significant work in the region. I think we are at about 700 megawatts penetration now in RE. But what does that actually mean? You know, we tend in the development space to throw numbers around. So you asked me, for instance, my vision. If we could cut to the chase for a moment, we need to deliver access to sustainable, affordable, clean energy to the people of our region. That's what we need to do in the shortest possible time. We need to scale sustainable energy initiatives by including the private sector into the conversation in a massive way. We need to reach underserved communities with sustainable energy. We need to develop projects that are bankable. But let me pause there. And if I were to throw a question, I'm not going to call any country's name in particular, but if I were to pull any country's name out of the hat and ask the audience, what is that country doing in sustainable energy? What is it doing in renewable energy? What's it doing with respect to climate resilience? If you are from the country, you may know the answer. If you aren't, you will probably be trying to Google it and find it in some space right now, yeah? We need to actually know what each other is doing. We are one Caribbean space, and oftentimes, unless you work deep in the development sector, you have no idea what is happening. And as I think the minister said, and a few of the ambassadors said earlier, we need to involve communities in this entire endeavor. At CCSA, at the Climate Smart Accelerator, we have actually developed a climate smart map. We all speak about the dearth of data in our region, right? In any conversation, well, we don't have it. But, you know, I really want to challenge that. I think we do have data. I just think it's not accessible. Because if you think about the number of development projects that we have done across the IDB, CDB, CAF, all, you know, the alphabet soup of the IFI world, we all have projects and we all keep data on these projects. If you think about the number of domestic projects that have been financed, all government agencies, government agencies aren't short of paper and data, I can tell you this, right? But you can't find it in any one space. So we need to populate. I'm urging persons to take a look at the Climate Smart Map and populate it with your data, because as the Prime Minister of Barbados says quite frequently, a region that is not insurable is not investable. Which brings me then quickly to the investors that we are seeking this scaled financing with. They need to know what's happening in our region. They need to look in one space and see what is happening and how ready we are to receive investment. Now, why would she say a region that's not insurable isn't investable? Because every June the 1st of every year, we look to the skies and pray. We pray earnestly, even those who don't believe in a higher deity pray, that this would not be the climate, the hurricane season that we are seriously impacted. But why is that? Why is it? Because, you know, if you were to listen to these things, we tend to be focused more on reducing emissions. And in the Caribbean, and I'm all for reducing emissions, let me be clear about that as well. But in the Caribbean, we have infrastructure that is built, and I think we can all say this in harmony, for a climate reality that no longer exists. So, as one member of our earlier panel said, we're going to be reducing emissions, but we're going to all be drowning. Did I get you right, Rachel? Was that it? Yeah? So we need to ensure that our grid, for instance, is sufficiently hardened to withstand the adverse weather impacts that are coming our way. I'm not going to take up too much of my colleagues' time, but I want to give an example of how serious this is in our region and for our people. In Barbados, Hurricane Beryl recently passed us. Hurricane Beryl passed to the south of Barbados, right? Depending on who you ask, it may be considered a miss for Barbados. However, the port defense structure, as we call it, the DOLOS, that protects our port, the only cargo port in Barbados. The port defense structure that has been there for 40 years. For 40 years it has stood. 1/3 of that was removed with the passage of Category 1 Beryl to the south of Barbados. We are living in completely different times. So the energy matrix that we speak about, whatever we determine is the way forward for the people, keeping that outcome in mind for the people, because we are not going to finance anything that will be successful if communities don't benefit. The unit of development is the citizen and the impact it has on transforming their lives. If we are to do anything in this region, it has to be focused primarily on adaptation and making this region investable by making it insurable for those who are looking to put money into the region at scale. I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. It's a good call to action to begin the conversation on. And you talked about the importance of having bankable projects. It's something that Minister Young talked about in his keynote address. I'm talked about the Atlantic hurricane season every June 1st. Creates a lot of risk in these countries. Climate adaptation projects, retrofitting infrastructure. There's a lot of capital that's needed up front for these projects.
Absolutely.
So we need to unlock financing, which makes me want to go to Tisha and maybe put Republic Bank on the spot. And as an institution that's lending across the region, what are some of the things that Republic Bank, other financial institutions can do to de-risk some of these projects?
Yes, of course. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, WASM and the Atlantic Council, for including Republic Bank here this afternoon, and of course to my other colleagues. I always tell people I am not a banker. I work for a bank, but I'm not a banker. My career has been in climate change, sustainability, and I absolutely agree with Daniel in terms of our specific position as small island states. We can reduce emissions all we want, but the end result is the same. We have to adapt, and I think we need to sort of be clear and I agree with you as well. We need to be clear as a Caribbean community, because sometimes we're lumped, and we had a discussion today in our table session. We're lumped as Latin America and the Caribbean. And of course, my colleague here, the ambassador, was also explaining that the Caribbean experience is not the Latin American experience, because Latin America has becoming more and more evolved in how they organize and so on, and we in the Caribbean are still floundering a bit. So at Republic Bank, we operate also in 16 countries across the world, inclusive of all through the Caribbean, of course, in South America, in Guyana and Suriname, and in Ghana, Cayman Islands. So there's a wide skew of where we operate. And we also are challenged in many ways. Now, we do have, when we launched our sustainability program 2 or 3 years ago, when I came on board, we put out several financing targets. So we have a US $200 million target for climate financing, and we have a $100 million target for sustainable agriculture. Now, my investment bankers, Alvin here and his other colleagues, had to go out and find these projects in the Caribbean. And of course, there's always that that question is what makes a project bankable. And, interestingly enough, we are almost to about 85% reaching our climate target, but a lot of the projects are not within Trinidad and Tobago. So they're in Barbados, they're part of a arranging project within the DR. So we now are at the same time looking for bankable projects, but as a bank, we are also looking inwards to see how we can, we need training and technical capacity and all those things as well. But how do we de-risk climate adaptation projects? Because many times a project may be bankable, say for the US or Canada or whatever, but when it comes to us in our traditional banking systems, we may not have the capacity to de-risk. So that's something we're trying to do at the bank as well. We're also trying to focus a lot on our SMEs, because they're the ones who I think require a lot of assistance, again, not just in accessing finance, but also in understanding how to make a bankable project when they come for financing. So we've set up an entire unit called the Center for Business Administration, which is also focusing. And interestingly enough, we have entirely de-risked that program because those clients can come with very little security and so on, and we will bank them. And so we are focusing a lot on them, not just in giving them loans, but also seeing how we could incorporate the SDGs within those loans. So women-led businesses, gender-focused businesses, businesses that provide sustainable employment, things like that as well. So we are, and of course I think other banks are following suit as well, but we come back to, and again, I know time is limited, so there's a lot of things I want to talk about, but I think, what's important as well is that, each country has national development plans, which are supposed to be aligned to, things like the Paris Agreement, to whatever COP is happening now. So a lot of, great things will be said there, but then the implementation stage is where sometimes it all falls apart. And I think there needs to be, and we spoke about this in our session this morning as well, the role of the private sector in lobbying for these changes to be implemented. And I think that's something that banks and the private sector, we need to do more collusively and collaboratively, because I was at a conference recently for the net zero banking group that the bank has signed on to. So there's banks all across the world. And there's a bank in Japan whereby the government actually shared their transition plan with the banks, so the banks can just run out there and look for projects. And that's something I think we need to sort of probably work together, maybe not just in individual countries, because sometimes projects are too small for that type of financing. But if we work as a unit, as a wider community, I think we would find strength in that community and stronger, and then technical capacity, we have access to, strength in numbers and so on to build these projects, but that's something we need to do as a bank as well. So there's quite a few things I think that, as a bank we're trying to build capacity in, but those are some of the things that I think we're working on right now, de-risking, finding the bankable projects, looking for technical capacity relationships, and of course, trying to build our skill and technical know-how in effective lobbying and partnership formation and so on.
Thanks, Tisha. And I think it aligns well with some of Daniel's comments in the sense that regional cohesion is important, all right? That was a very big theme for the private session we had in the morning as well. And this question of bankability keeps coming up, right? How are we de-risking projects? How are we getting financing, not just to big contractors, but even small businesses, women-led businesses as well. Dale, I want to bring you in, right? You've worked across the Caribbean, and no one country is the same, right? And every country has its own challenge, even though there are common challenges. But on this question of bankability, in a small market, like most of the countries in the CARICOM region are, what does a bankable project look like on the energy side, or even on the climate adaptation side as well?
So it all comes down to how you're able to repay the debt, right? So these projects are high capex projects. They require high debt financing. So the offtake agreement is usually what lands these things to become bankable. Long-term offtake, multi-year contracts, usually in double decade, 20-year, looking for 20-year contracts for these things to happen. And this is where the problem starts. It starts there. It starts that usually you're dealing with a utility that may be government-owned, private-owned, that can't give or don't have a license for that period of time, so they can't give a bankable contract, or they're financially burdened already. They're not financially viable, so they can't give long-term contracts. So what you have now is that it needs to go up one level. It needs to go up to the government level. When you reach to that level, governments, most of the Caribbean governments, through the years, going through what Daniel said, praying and hoping that they're not impacted by climate change or hurricanes, usually a lot of them now are highly debt-laden. So being able to take on a government guarantee is not, that adds to the debt burden, so that limits the ability for them to borrow. So once you have that problem, that compound, so now what you've seen happening is, and we're working on multiple projects across the region, working with governments directly to what are the instruments required to help these projects go forward. So now you have some of the development banks stepping in, like the EIB, who now say they could back some of it in terms of a risk kind of guarantee. So you have different instruments coming in to help make these projects bankable. So it all stems from that, the ability to repay the debt over a long-term period. And then there's risk associated with the regulatory framework. Will it change in law, change in political landscape? These things, termination payments, these things are what really grind these things to halt or slow it down drastically. So I can tell you projects that we're working on, what we try to do now is we built out a list of items that we discuss up front. These things you need to get in front of everybody, because it takes a while to get these, to get countries and different government agencies on board with this, because they've not seen this before. Projects have happened either government funding through loans or corporate entities putting in their equity into projects and building projects and infrastructure. So we've not seen this, and so asking them to understand a termination clause, if you default, you pay me back, that takes some time to wrap their minds around how does this work, the default schedule. So there's a lot of work has to go into build the capacity of agencies. I know every agency here, and Daniel has been working on that, Republic as well, how to get that knowledge across to these agencies, to get them comfortable of signing up on an implementation agreement, saying that this is something that we will back, the risk reduce over time. And so that those things are the nuts and bolts that gets down to really what causing these projects not to take off. Yeah.
Thanks, Dale. So it seems like significant capacity issues, right? And this one across the entire Caribbean. That's a common problem. So I'm going to follow up with you. One additional question is, how can we use a hemispheric forum like the Summit of the Americas, or even in between Summit of the Americas, that the process that exists there, to maybe, a lot of these things are learned knowledge, access that knowledge and that expertise, not just within the Caribbean, but across the hemisphere, whether it's the US, Canada, or Latin American countries?
So I can tell you, we've seen it work, right? So we've worked on PAC 2030. Daniel has worked on that, and what we saw is that we came up with a roadmap coming out of some of the energy work that we did, and it focused on how do we integrate the Caribbean, and that was taken up by the CDB, which launched a whole interconnection study around the Caribbean, looking at different energy sources in different areas. So it can work. What I think we need to do is create this working group, a very specific working group amongst the region to really advance these things and to keep this on the front burner all the time. It's good to have these events, and it's one-off spot things that we build momentum and then we lose momentum, but we need a consistent working group coming from the Summit of the Americas or the OES, that we now have everybody here that could discuss these things, because these threats are not going to go away. They're only going to get more frequent and more disastrous, right? So it's something that I think that this region needs that platform to build off the Summit of the Americas platform. Yeah.
Thanks, Dale. Stuart, I want to go to you. Private sector has been mentioned a couple of times, and I think everybody in this room understands the importance of private sector having a voice at the table. So how can, as president of AmCham, how can, business sector organizations like AmCham play a role in bridging, the public sector and the private sector together? And even more importantly, how can AmCham utilize the upcoming Summit of the Americas to kind of do some of these things?
Well, afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. I tremendously appreciate it. On behalf of AmCham Trinidad and other AmChams, it's really good to see the involvement and the embracement of the private sector portion, right? Started with Ambassador Bond, Minister mentioned it, Minister Young mentioned it, and then you all are mentioning it as well, right? So clearly we're at a point where collaboration is key. And I think all of the players in the market are very clear on the fact that collaboration is what is needed for us to get where we need to be and to succeed. So what do I see? I see us being able to act as a strong facilitator, as someone can play a role in assisting the government and the private sector in forming private-public partnerships, in working more closely together on projects, and in getting us to a place that improves the economic atmosphere for the businessman. I'll give you some examples. So let's take the BP, Shell, NGC working on Lara project. That is a massive opportunity for us in a public-private partnership to improve or reduce the amount of natural gas that's going to be used to produce power. All right? That's huge, because the less natural gas we use to produce power is the more natural gas we have available for sale. The more natural gas we sell, the more Forex we earn. And we all know that right now, Forex is one of the biggest problems facing the private sector. Right? So there's no business in this country, I don't care what sector they're in, that's going to say they're not on board towards working closely on a project that's going to lead to more Forex availability. So that's huge. I think another very important role we can play is from an education perspective. And Daniel said it, he said it quite strongly. There's a lot that's happening throughout the territory that it's like it's a secret. For that matter, I learned today, to my surprise, on our table, that there are things that are happening right here in Trinidad. That's a secret that people don't know about. There are committees, there are teams, there are solutions that are in place that are either not properly utilized, people are not aware of. And I think that's a huge role that we can play as a chamber as well in disseminating, helping the government disseminate that information to the private sector of what's going on. What are some of these things that are taking place that exist that can help in the situation? You mentioned security. I think we all know security is a huge one for us. And anything that we can do towards energy security is huge. But this is coupled at a time where we're seeing some of the hottest years on record. So everybody's dying for air conditioning systems and dying for more cooling, but yet we're asking you to cut back your usage, conserve, use less. Let's save that. Let's find other ways. So I think a big part to get to it is we can assist with education, we can assist with matchmaking and getting people together to work on projects. I'll give you one more example. We just hosted our HSSC conference, a 2-day conference. One of our keynote speakers in the conference was the Commissioner of Prisons. And I was blown away at how open, how transparent, how willing he was to ask for private sector assistance towards things that he is trying to accomplish. And again, towards securing the nation. Prisons plays a huge role in securing the nation. And that's a great way we can assist as well.
Thanks, Stuart. Facilitation, matchmaking, education, all critical components of bridging that gap between the public and the private sector. Daniel, I want to go to you to take a more regional outlook. We understand the importance of the private sector, but how can we incentivize the private sector to participate in different project development, energy, climate, food, whatever it might be? How can public sector work with the private sector? How can regional institutions like the CDB work with the private sector to really move forward? And then Tisha, we'll go to you on thinking about, we know financing is important, but at which stage of project development is the financing most important? Where do we need to put the weight and which stage of project development to get financing, pre-project, during it, after, things like that? But Daniel.
Well, first of all, I think you need to ask Tisha another question because they're going to answer that too. But no, in all seriousness, look, this is a relay. You know, this constant decoupling of the MDB world, the IFI world, the public sector, and then the private sector over here will get us nowhere. It has gotten us nowhere, and it will continue to get us nowhere. I agree with what my colleagues have said thus far. We have within this region access to concessional financing. We need more. And I think that is one of the areas that the Summit of the Americas and the convening power that you have and the access to capitals that you have can bring. Because we have access, and we need more access to concessional resources. Now, why is that important? It is important because the private sector has certain metrics, and this is not a guilt trip on them, but they have certain metrics that they have to meet, right? However, the IFI community, the MDBs, have other metrics, right? I mean, yes, our last names tend to be bank, but the middle names is often development, right? And so we have that we have to deliver. Now, how does this work? It works in that the early capital stage of projects, whether it is to prove resources, to demystify what is required, to de-risk the entire intervention, I think that, and we've seen it work successfully, that is the role of the IFI and MDB community. Having done that, we no longer need to take taxpayers' money, which is where the concessional resources come from, if we're being honest, to put into what really would then be a commercial venture. Because if the investor can prove to Stuart and to Tisha that this is now a viable entity, which they would have done because we, in the private sector, in the IFI world, have provided them with resources to do that, they can take the baton and run with it. So again, at the Climate Smart Accelerator in Climate Week this year, we launched an innovation fund looking to do exactly that. You see, when we speak to projects not being bankable, let's be fair. I mean, I often say it myself as well, but let's be fair to many of these small businesses who are seeking to be part of the ecosystem. We need them to be part of this ecosystem. We need communities to be part of the ecosystem, but they don't know how to write projects. They've never been trained. There's no project writing in any primary schools in this, or secondary schools in this region. They don't know how to do it. So we launched Innovation Fund. We also have the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Fund, CCSA, and the Caribbean Development Bank, partly financed by the Government of Canada, looking to reduce the cost of capital for energy projects, for clean energy projects. You pool all of these concessional resources together, and you de-risk projects, and you hand it over to the commercial space, because now they will see where their return on investment will come from. This is the kind of thing that we're speaking about. I mean, I can get into the need also to use your convening power to come up with innovative solutions. At CDB, we put together something called a contingent recoverable grant with the government of St. Kitts. And I know you are acutely familiar with this, but I'm sure Stuart isn't. Again, because it's a secret, right? We're not sharing our stories. How the contingent recoverable grant work, with St. Kitts supporting them in the geothermal activities, is that we fund the exploration to prove the resource of geothermal resources in St. Kitts Nevis. Now, if the resource is not proven, it becomes a grant. Thereby, it does not add to the debt overhang of the country. If the resource is proven and then move to the generation stage, it becomes a viable project that they will make money from and converts to a loan that they pay back CDB, and with financing from the private sector, they actually are able to access this. Is this kind of innovative? We are in a space, now as a region, let me be clear, we have no plan B. Huh? There is no plan B. We have to survive this climate crisis, and it's not looking good right now. So we need innovative solutions. I can speak more, and I'm not going to take anything with him, but I can speak more about the debt for climate swap, which is Barbados is engaged in, the water reclamation project, which is being hailed globally as one of the more innovative solutions, where we've bought back debt using more concessional terms. And in that savings in interest rate, we're going to use that money to finance capital works. That's never been done. This is the space we're in, using our brains. We are fabulously intelligent people in this region, coming up with innovative solutions that will save generations to come. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Daniel. And you were correct. I do have to ask Tisha a different question because I think.
Sorry.
So I think what's clear is that the financing is needed in the pre-project phase, right? So Tisha, my question to you is going to be twofold. One is, how do we unlock that financing, right? Because it's not that easy, right? What are some of the things you need to see, as a financial institution to be able to unlock it? And two is, what struck me, Daniel, as you said, is that there's a lot of innovative instruments out there that have been helping different countries, different projects. I think, in the spirit of regional cohesion, how do we standardize some of those instruments and products so that it's not just one-offs, but it's something, you mentioned the Barbados project, that can be replicable here in Trinidad, in Guyana, other countries as well. And then I give that question to the whole panel as we start to run out of time.
Well, I think Daniel spoke, a lot of what we would need to do at the back in terms of unlocking financing. And I think it depends also, on the size of the project as well. Unlocking financing, for example, for a project like what Dale is doing with HCF. All the things are in order, it's being, they've been able to show back their payback period, the risk and so on. But again, when it comes to, legislation and regulation and so on, these are barriers, right? So, and that varies per country, right? So our legislation is different with TNTEC as opposed to Barbados and Grenada and so on, which has a different grid system. So, as a bank, we, you can come to us to unlock finance at that stage where you have a big a finished proposal, but again, there'll be other barriers, right? Whereas it might be different for the smaller, medium type businesses where, we would have to guide them more in terms of, well, how do they access concessional financing? Because we are offering more products, not just at the investment level, but we're also looking at retail and commercial products, climate resilient loans, loans for EVs and so on that would have to sort of go through a system of standardization, as you spoke about. So one of the products that we are going to be implementing soon is a climate resiliency loan program. And of course, that would have different standards across different regions and so on. So a standardization is critical, yes, in terms of accessing finance. But again, looking, as what Daniel was saying as well, looking for innovative ways of blending finance, of coming up with solutions that there's a project. It may not be bankable at the commercial bank level, but then it may be, we need to look and see what other opportunities are available at the development bank opportunities or with capacity building. And, but again, that is not, it happens, but I think there needs to be a more structured system regionally for that to happen, whereby we sit with the IDBs or the CDBs and we come up with solutions for these types of projects and how we address them as well. But again, I'm sure Dale and Stuart will want to input in that as well.
So for me, I don't think there's a lack of finance available, right? So it's not a lack of finance. The issue is not lack of finance. The issue is how to get the finance in. And so back to Daniel and the work that they've been doing and something that they've put out, and I didn't see him talk about it, so I got to talk about it. the minimum functional regulation, right, that they've done. And again, was some discussions that we were having, and they led a group to come up with regulations that could be the minimum functional specifications. What would be the minimum requirements for any country to have, what investors would look for what changes in the regulations needed to be included so that the investments could become standardized, the market could become bigger for investors. So investors look at what the risk. The risk is small markets. They have huge opportunities to put they will look at where is the best use of their dollar. If I put my dollar in the US, the return is guaranteed. I could just put it in the S&P, guaranteed. Why would I want to invest here? So you need to, the vision has to be clear as to why am I investing here? And that message has to permeate the investor space, not only country by country, but by the region. And so Daniel evangelized very well, better than most, as to why we should invest in the Caribbean, right? It's a beautiful place. It has good resources, smart people. It has a lot to offer the globe. In terms of tourism, it's #1 destination. So there's a lot to offer. So we build the product. And so we usually send out the investees, and they speak about it, and they know, but they don't link it back all the way as to how to create investment and how to crowd investment in. And so those things need to link back in terms of how we deal with climate, how we deal with energy, because these things are part of the global north conversation. The populations, they are sensitized to climate change and what they look for. So when they look and there's no information, they think that we don't care, but we do care. It's just we have an issue of how we market these things and how we get this information out there. Around the financing and getting, and so Daniel, I know they have been working hard to get more financing in, but the rates, because of the premiums that we carry based on our high debt capacity, the country risk profiles are high. So how do we change that? And our work has been going on with like the DFC to change these countries. And it was mentioned by the ambassador before about countries being high income countries which could go to no income, but high income, which means that they don't qualify for certain benefits or certain concessional financing that low income countries do. And we've made that point at the Atlantic Council already of how do we access financing that low income countries have access for the Caribbean, because that would now help create blended financing opportunities. So yes, we could do a lot of work on the pre-work, and the multi-development banks could de-risk early development, but when you get on the back end, you're also going to need instruments to guarantee. And so we saw that with the hurricanes, with Grenada, in terms of the insurance policy that they have, which again was touted as revolutionary in terms of how they were able to set that up and be able to recover and get that insurance to come in to help them with the recovery. So we do have pockets of innovative ideas that we need to gather together, and we need that agency to really drive that. So usually is the CDB usually raise their hand and say, we will do it. And but yeah, we need that to permeate all through the Caribbean. Yes, the risk profiles vary by island, but we all face very similar risk.
Thanks, Dale. And so what seems to be a common theme is messaging, education, sharing knowledge. It seems to me that a hemispheric forum like the Summit of the Americas can be that platform. Maybe not even just being the platform for, across Latin America, the US, and Canada, but even between countries. Because even as a region, at the heads of state and government level, there's not that many convenings. There's probably 2 a year where countries are convening and sharing, even at a technical level. So maybe it's an opportunity at the Summit of the Americas to not just work across Caribbean, Latin America, but even interregionally as well, and ensuring that there is a lot of agency coming from our Caribbean institutions, the CDB, CCRI, CARELEC, et cetera. So in that spirit, thinking about the Summit of the Americas, Stuart, I'll start with you and then come back down the line here, is, what is at least one thing you want to see come out of the next Summit of the Americas, knowing that it's going to be hosted here in the Caribbean and the DR, that will be of utmost importance to the Caribbean region?
So again, for me, it would be the education. The wins that have been experienced elsewhere, the sharing of that information or dissemination of that information to the private sector so that we could be better prepared for the conversations, better understand the opportunities before, and maybe even step up to be potential investors.
Thanks, Stuart. Dale?
For me, it would be the creation of a climate and energy, dedicated climate and energy working group out of the Summit of the Americas, and really focusing, if we want, it could be across LAC, but dedicated to the Caribbean's initiatives, focusing on creating this Caribbean energy market. I think any successful region has an energy market, and we see it everywhere else. South America has an interconnected grid. They could supply. Same thing with Central America, same thing with the US, and even Canada and Europe. So we really need to figure out how we're going to become an energy market, and that gives us power. That gives us the ability to move energy in different directions and really grow the economies.
Thanks, El. Tisha?
For me, it would be opportunities or some sort of system to create effective lobbying to our governments to really bring all these things together, to be on the same page with legislation, with regulation, with standardization, with when are we going to start reporting? Because as we keep saying, we will be uncompetitive if we don't get with the program, and we need to do it quickly. And we need our governments, our leaders, and so on to really put things in place for that to happen.
Thank you, Tisha. Daniel, final word.
One, okay. Private, public, multilateral, civil society coalescing around one outcome. Let's not boil the ocean. Let's pick one. I led with access to affordable, sustainable, clean energy to underserved, to the people of the region. Maybe it's that one, maybe it's not. But a cohesion within all of those groups, a commitment to move forward as one. Anything else will continue to be getting nowhere fast.
Thanks, Daniel. And a good final call to action, which started with a call to action from you. I want to thank you all for joining us. It's been a very exciting panel, and as we mentioned at the top and mentioned at the private session, this is the first of many conversations leading up to the next Summer of the Americas. If I can quote Daniel, there's no plan B. We have to survive the climate crisis, right? And so we always need to continue to move forward, and the Atlantic Council is committed to continue to convene these conversations and work with partners to ensure that the appropriate conversations are definitely happening. I once again want to thank our local partners, the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator, Republic Bank Limited, and American Chamber of Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much for supporting this event and helping to also be a convener here on the ground in Port of Spain. Thank you very much to the U.S. State Department, who have been excellent partners. Ambassador Moore, for your comments. Jen, who's here as well, and the team that's still back in Washington helping to convene this. Also, thank you to the Atlantic Council team. Charlene Aguilera, anybody in this in-person audience has gotten her email multiple times over the past couple of weeks. Iveta Kruma from our global events team, Kim from Western Door Federal, and then of course Diego Rea, who was on the first panel here as well, for your support. And once again, thank you again to the in-person audience who not just participated as audience members for this conversation, but also at the private conversation that we had earlier today. So once again, thank you everybody, and looking forward to the next conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.